Hey guys, Haz here at Shield Canine, and you guys asked for it, so now I'm giving it to you. This is my review of the Rottweiler. And sitting next to me is a baby Rottweiler. Yes, you heard me correctly. This is a baby. This is Max. He's 7-8 months old, and he is here for a board and train. He's here because he's a fear-reactive dog. We've got some work to do with him to get him where he needs to be in order for him to live his best life. All that being said, I am going to now give you my review of the breed based on, once again, my experience with countless individuals over the past 15 years, primarily through my board and train program, though I have also imported and trained a couple of Rottweilers as protection dogs. And then I've also, of course, done some sport training with various Rottweilers that people have brought me that they wanted to do dog sport with. So I'm going to give you my takes on the breed, and we'll see if Max here can help me. Max, come on. People want to see you, man. When you lie like that, they're not going to be able to see you. I think, guys, in summary, the best way to kind of describe the Rottweiler is like a combination between a Mastiff or a Bully and a German Shepherd. They're kind of like a combination between the two. That is my best kind of quick analogy of what I think of the Rottweiler as being, just again, based on my experience training them, doing a lot of behavior modification, dog sport, protection work, so on and so forth. Now, I personally think that the best way to form a strong understanding of what a breed is not, again, through looking at, what Google tells you, but actually having hands-on time with the dogs and a variety of individuals, whether it's dogs that have been bred here, dogs that have been bred in Europe, show lines, dogs of no particular breeding, so on and so forth. And again, that's what my perception of the breed is going to be. When I speak to you guys about the breed, I know some of you, because you have the emotional regulation of children, will get upset, will get personally offended, will think I'm talking about your dog. But again, we're speaking in generalities because that's the only thing that you can do when you're speaking about an entire race of dogs. Anyways, as I said, Max here is 7 months old. So needless to say, Rottweilers, especially the males, tend to be quite large. And that's something that you will have to factor into the equation if you're thinking about getting one of these. Now let's speak about the temperament. I think that's the best place to start when actually talking about this breed. They trend towards being aloof and or all the way into the realm of antisocial. That means at best, they usually don't really care about strange people, strange dogs, so on and so forth. And then they can go all the way down the road of being antisocial, where they're actually reactive and or aggressive towards people and, other dogs that they don't know. That is actually within the breed standard. These were bred to be guard dogs. These were bred to be dogs that have a guardian nature. And if they are very social, like your average golden retriever, let's say, or your lab, they're not going to be particularly good at that job. So, it's quite normal for them to be aloof and or antisocial. So you need to be prepared for that when purchasing one of these dogs. That behavior also makes them, in general, territorial. And again, that's part of the breed standards. What makes them fantastic guard dogs is they tend to be territorial. Once they live somewhere, once they live in a home, they live on a property, they tend to know it's theirs, and they tend to be naturally territorial and inherently suspicious of anyone or anything that encroaches upon their territorial boundary. And that can manifest in bluff behaviors like barking, growling, lunging on the fence, all the way up into, attacking someone that trespasses onto the property. And again, trespassing is a term that you need to understand. A lot of people are like, yeah, I want my dog to attack people that trespass. Yeah, except if that person is a guest that was invited, and as far as the dog is concerned, they're trespassing, or maybe it's a visiting family member and the dog doesn't know that, and as far as they're concerned, this is a suspicious individual that represents an imminent threat, and they're going to engage that threat. And with these big, strong dogs, that can mean something very, very significant. Rottweilers have killed people in the past, and knowing these dogs and how intense and strong they can be, it's absolutely no surprise. Reactive dog, barking, lunging, chasing, pulling. Enjoy peaceful, pleasant walks again in as little as 1 day of training. Fast, effective training that actually works. Think Shield Canine. Now, let's talk a little bit about how they are with other dogs, because I think this is really, really important. By far, the most common issue I see with Rottweilers is reactivity towards other dogs, and that can go from just barking and lunging on the leash all the way up into real dog aggression, especially within the same sex. So it's very common to see males exhibit same-sex aggression towards other males, and again, we're not talking about a little growl and tussle. We're talking about a full-on attack that could lead to the death death and destruction of the other dog, because again, these guys are very powerful and very committed. I've seen it also in females that they will show that same-sex aggression towards other females. Intersex, they generally do quite well, but of course you must use a lot of caution, especially when there's a great size disparity. So like if I wanted to have this dog live with a female Chihuahua, for instance, I have no doubt that ultimately it would work, but in the beginning I would be very careful. I wouldn't just throw them together and be like, all right, here you go, let's have at it. The dog aggression is honestly really my biggest gripe with the breed. Is it's very common that you see that they do have dog aggression, and it's something that you do need to be prepared for. They can be generally nervy. There is a lot of nerve in Rottweilers. It's aside from the dog aggression, the biggest issue that I do see with this breed is, unfortunately, there's a fair few nerve issues within the breed, and that's just from people breeding dogs that lack the confidence and the overall stability that they should have. And paired with some of the other traits that the breed should have, that's actually potentially a very dangerous thing. And unfortunately, Max is an excellent example of that, where, you know, and I'll show you a video right now of him. He was brought to us because he is a dog that, you know, does lack confidence, and he can be nervous, especially around new people and new places. Led to him, even at the age of 7 months, already having a bite where he bit somebody. Luckily, it wasn't too severe, but he's a 7-month-old dog. And you can see how quickly, you know, when by the time he's 18 months, what was not a big deal will become a huge deal and potentially lead to someone being hospitalized or severely injured. In terms of male versus female, I always say this, guys, and especially for this breed, there is a lot of disparity between the males and the females, both in terms of size and in temperament. The males are much more prone towards having behavioral issues or issues that can make them difficult to handle for a new handler, versus the females tend to, in general, be, you know, a little more compliant, a little more easy to handle, a little more sensitive, and the females still look fantastic. They still have that big blocky look and that classic Rottweiler appearance. So now we've spoken about females, let's speak about the males. Issues specific to the males that I've seen is as they get older, 18 months plus, they can start exhibiting, you know, rank dominance behaviors where they can get aggressive over affection, they can get aggressive over having collars put on them, they can resource guard space and, you know, food, toys, etc. And this is something that I have seen with quite a few male Rottweilers, and it can make them a challenge and also a little bit maybe dicey to handle for people that don't know what they're doing. It's definitely something to be aware of. Now, do most male Rottweilers exhibit these traits? No, but I have seen it in a fair few of them, and it's something that you need to be prepared for as a possibility. Of course, you can ameliorate these issues with proper training, raising, and most importantly, selecting dogs that are stable and that come from stable lines. Max is also here, aside from being fear reactive and fear aggressive, for resource guarding behavior. He, even at this young age, is already, you know, resource guarding bones and stuff from the owners, and we have seen some of that behavior, which we are going to be addressing with him, so stay tuned for that. So that's something to take into consideration. Again, guys, keep in mind, I'm speaking in generalities, and I'm speaking about things that you need to look out for. Now, in general, they're quite dopey, they're quite lovable dogs, especially with people that they know. I would classify them in general as good family dogs, especially when raised with the children. You know, they're very loyal, and they generally love everybody that they live with. Again, they can be a little dicey with strangers, so just be careful with that and take the appropriate precautions, both in terms of training and correct management with them. You know, they can be challenging to walk outside if you live in a busy area, again, if you don't take the correct precautions from a training and management perspective. But all that being said, you know, they make fantastic family dogs, fantastic protection dogs, and fantastic guard dogs, and there are a few things more intimidating than a Rottweiler at the fence, let's just say. Probably for me, to be honest with you, these guys are my most favorite off-breed. I guess the last thing I want to say about the temperament of the Rottweiler is intensity. They are so intense with everything that they do. Whether it's playing with you, whether it's cuddling with you, whether it's being aggressive, whether it's anything that they do, they can just be really, really intense, powerful dogs. And that intensity can be a little bit scary for people, especially if you're not prepared for it. All right, guys, so the next thing we're going to talk about with this breed is health. Now, again, I don't breed these dogs. I'm not familiar with all the, you know, many health issues that they have, but I'm going to say from my perception of working with them and dealing with many, many individuals, they don't have anything significant in terms of health as compared to other breeds. You know, if they're well bred, they're reasonably healthy dogs. There's not a lot of complaints of them dying young or anything like that. The big thing with the Rottweiler is not really the health. I think it's the temperament and making sure you select the right temperament, because the wrong temperament and these guys can be very, very dangerous. dangerous. Okay guys, so in terms of working traits, we're speaking about personal protection training, dog sport, police service work, that kind of stuff. The Rottweiler, as I've already mentioned, has good drive. They have generally a lot of food drive. And while they might not be obsessed with the toy in and of itself, and by that I mean with a dead toy on the ground, they do love to play. They love the interaction with the handler. They love to compete. They love combat. They love competing. They love that feeling of struggling and striving and overcoming. You want to make a Rottweiler happy, play a game of tug. No good dog training nearby? No time for weekly classes? Fast, effective dog training that you can do from home during your daily walks. No extra time, and it actually works. Train with the best trainers in the world remotely. ShieldCanineOnline.com. Okay guys, so in terms of protection training with Rottweilers, they tend not to play protection. Like for them, they take it very, very seriously. Even when you try to introduce it as a game, they tend to take it really, really seriously. It's just natural to their nature. They have that inherent suspicion and they love to fight, as I already mentioned, and they just take it to a 10. So while that might be good from a maybe personal protection / guard dog standpoint, in terms of dog sport, in terms of even like police service work, I don't think that they're your best bet. They're much more likely to run out of steam. Like I said, they don't have the best endurance in terms of that. So if we're talking about like a dog sport, like, I don't know, IGP or PSA, where there's a lot of biting, a lot of secondary control, so on and so forth, you'll find that they kind of run out of steam and lose concentration, especially the longer things go, and they tend to be kind of the same in obedience. Generally, for pursuits like dog sport or police service work, you need a dog that has the ability to concentrate and stay in a more clear state of mind for longer periods of time while also maintaining high levels of drive and arousal. And I don't think that's the Rottweiler's skill set. As I said before, and as I'll say again, I think they make fantastic protection and guard dogs, but maybe not so much the dog sport dog or the police dog. Okay guys, so in terms of trainability, how is it to train these dogs? Because as I've mentioned, I've trained quite a few of them. If you're considering this breed seriously, or maybe you already have one, what should you know about them in terms of their trainability? Well, for me, the Rottweiler, because they generally have good drive for things like food and play, it's very easy to motivate them to do things, which is always fantastic. I mean, there are some dogs that have very low levels of motivation, and it's very, very difficult to kind of get them excited about doing things for things. And the Rottweiler is generally not one of those things. Where you will run into a challenge with the Rottweiler is they're very easily aroused by things in the environment, whether it's another dog, maybe a strange person, a bunny rabbit, whatever else. And when they become excited or aroused by something, very similar to, you know, bully type dogs or pit bull type dogs, right? They've become laser focused on that thing, and it's very hard to kind of get them out of that mode and reorient it on the task that you had with them, such as, you know, maybe holding a nice heel as they walk, so on and so forth. So they very much have like a one-track mind. They're kind of all in or they're all out, and it's easy for them to kind of switch from one thing to another. So building up their ability to kind of stay concentrated, focused under distractions, that kind of thing, that's where you'll generally have challenge. If you're training by yourself in a, you know, in a field or in a room, you know, you can really fool yourself into believing your Rottweiler is an angel that, you know, will always obey you and listen to you. But what you'll find is when you kind of get them into the real world where there's tons of, you know, natural distractions, you know, it's very easy for them to kind of zone in on something else and then just become hyper fixated on that thing and completely ignore you no matter how many times you wave the cookies in their face or, you know, say, hey buddy, I got the ball, your favorite ball, please pay attention to me, right? So with them, the training, as with all dogs, must be balanced. But with the Rottweiler, it really must be balanced because, as I've said before, you know, the consequences for losing control of these dogs is quite severe, especially, you know, if one of these guys grabs another dog or grabs a human being, which unfortunately happens all too often, you know, they can do enormous amounts of damage. So having really good control of your Rottweiler is absolutely essential. When we speak about training, we cannot only speak about, you know, how easy it is to motivate the dogs. We also must speak about how these dogs respond to pressure, because pressure is a part of any complete training system. And by pressure, I mean something as simple as pulling on the collar or, you know, using tools in training, all of these types of things. So how do these dogs respond to pressure? Now, in general, I find that most Rottweilers are actually quite sensitive to pressure in the sense that you actually don't need a lot to get a lot. The problem is, as I've mentioned earlier, and I just buzzed him because he came off place because there's a dog in the background, and as you can see, he's doing that fixating thing, and this is already after 2 weeks of training. You can see it's something that's going to take a little bit to get that completely out of his system. But all that being said, with the Rottweiler, they're generally quite sensitive to pressure. The problem is when they see something that excites them, all of a sudden they become the next coming of the Terminator. They're Arnold Schwarzenegger they're getting shot with a machine gun. It's just bouncing off of them. And all of a sudden, all that pressure that you thought, oh, he's so sensitive, it takes just a tiny little, touch here and there to get him doing what I need him to do. It doesn't work anymore. And you dial up the pressure, and then all of a sudden the dog overstimulates, overreacts, redirects, stuff like that. And that's why it's really important that you have someone that really knows what they're doing when they train these dogs, because you have to teach them the language of pressure in a way that they understand it, in a way that they can process even when under high levels of external arousal, be it other dogs, people, external distractions, so on and so forth. What I'm fundamentally saying is, while they can understand and accept pressure, you have to be very careful how you teach them that pressure. If you don't know what you're doing with the pressure, and if you just try to kind of over rely on the dog acquiescing to the pressure, or just kind of using the pressure to like force the dog to stop doing things you don't like, generally speaking with the Rottweiler, especially with a male, it's more than likely at some point going to go south on you. Either you could get hurt or someone else could get hurt. So it's very important that you do the proper training with these guys when they're young. And that's why I'm so happy that a dog like Max is here at the age of 7, 8 months, when he's still a baby, and we have the ability to make these impressions on him and teach him the language of training, of communication, of pressure. Impulse control, guys, I've said it 1,000 times, I'm going to say it again, is a language. A lot of Rottweilers, especially when they're young, if they're reactive, if they're intense dogs, which many of them are, they lack that natural kind of impulse control, and you really have to work hard to install it and then manage them appropriately moving forward to ensure that the impulse control kind of remains there, because a Rottweiler without impulse control is potentially a very dangerous and scary thing. So similar to bullies, despite their physical toughness, and bullies are much the same. This is why I kind of like, other than the physical similarities between them and like bully type dogs, and I know bullies can encompass a very wide variety of dogs. I'm saying that so you guys kind of understand what I'm just comparing them to a general type of dog, just, to be clear. They're mentally sensitive in general, which is a good thing. Now, I've certainly seen, and again, speaking about male Rottweilers, I've certainly seen some male Rottweilers that are very stubborn and difficult in the training, and will turn on you if you try to make them do something, and it can be quite a dangerous experience to train them. They can turn on you over things like touching their paws, or doing things like saying, hey, you have to come with me over here, and all of a sudden the dog's coming up the leash at you. Thankfully, it's not a super common issue, but it is something to keep in mind with certain, male Rottweilers. They can be like that, and they can actually be quite dangerous and difficult. I'm not saying in general, I'm saying I've certainly seen it on more occasions than I would see it in many other breeds, that the males can be like that. All that being said, they're definitely not the hardest dog to train, because they have that motivation and because they have that mental sensitivity. Just navigating the pressure portion of the training requires, like I said, a little bit of a clever touch, an expert touch, so to speak. But once you have it, and once you have one of these dogs obedient, there are few better dogs to have, to hang out with, to live with, to go out with, to be protected by than the Rottweiler. I love them. I love them. They're big goofs. They're fun to train in general, and they look awesome. If you got Rottweiler and you need some training on your Rottweiler, by all means, send it down. We've trained a lot of them. If you have behavioral problems with your Rottweiler, no problem. Dog aggression, human aggression, all that stuff, will happily help you and get you sorted out. But for me, that is my impressions of the Rottweiler as a professional dog trainer. They're athletic, they're intense, they're soft, they're goofy, and they can also be real dangerous if not properly selected, trained, and managed moving forward.